As you enter the space today, we would love for you to share your name and where you are zooming in from in the chat if you have not done so already. I am Dr. Antonia Farrell, and Inclusion at the University of Kentucky in Environment, and the past National Manners President from 2019 to 2021. I will be serving as your facilitator today. Today, I am zooming in from somewhere a little different. I'm not in Kentucky today. I am zooming in from the Garifuna, Mayan, and Mopan lands known by many as the country of Belize. I would like to take a few moments of silence to remember the victims, their families, and loved ones from Uvalde, Texas, Buffalo, New York, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. Can we take a few seconds to pause? Thank you. To ensure an inclusive and accessible space for all, we have 2 American Sign Language interpreters for the event. We have Liz Health and Katie Sartoris. They will be taking turns interpreting in ASL. We'll be spotlighting their video along with our speakers today, but you can also pin their image on your Zoom screen by clicking the More icon with the 3 dots button on your video and clicking Pin Video. Closed captioning is also available today. Throughout the session today, the chat box will be available for you to put any questions or comments that might come up. We will be monitoring all comments for the duration of the session. Please make sure you are on mute unless you are speaking. Julia Bakay is joining us from Urban Wild Studio, capturing the event with virtual graphics. We will get a sneak peek throughout the session, and at the end of the session, their final visuals will be posted on our Padlet site for you to download and share. As we engage today, I want to remind you to get comfortable, whether you are inside or outside. Stay on mute when you are not speaking, and if you feel comfortable, turn your cameras on. Speaking of getting comfortable, I have a few questions I would like for you to respond to in the chat box. The first question: what is your favorite food or beverage to have at an in-person event? Again, what is your favorite food or beverage to have at an in-person event? And yes, Katie, I can put that in the chat. I see coffee, sparkling water, soda water, unsweetened sweet tea, coffee, pastries, food, teriyaki meatballs, if we're talking cocktail hour. For beverage, water, cookies, cheese plates, fruits, pizza, desserts, bagels, herbal tea, something from where I am meeting, real lemonade and pastries, fruits. Whoever said water without ice, yes. White pine tea, sweet tea, dessert, fruit and savory foods, less sweet, local food and or cocktail, coffee and a breakfast burrito, fruits, +1 for local foods, okay? An occasional Diet Coke and something salty, especially in the afternoon. All right, we have a lot of +1s for local foods. I'm gonna add that to my list too. Good, strong coffee and cream. Awesome. All right, you can keep adding your comments in the chat, but I have one more question before we get into the business of the Women's Forest Congress. So when you've had a long day, what do you need to recharge? Again, when you've had a long day, What do you need to recharge? A long walk, workout, a run in the woods, hang time with my rescue dog, alone time, time alone, time with dog, time outdoors, my garden, quiet time, exercise, pup walks, +1 for cocktail. Okay, meditation, time alone or yoga, stillness, hugs with the pup, and great music. A lot of commonalities here. Zumba, TV and wine, a walk in nature time, or we're gonna have a good time in October. A lot of commonalities here. A hug for my hubby, silence in nature, time on my porch with some wine and a book. Thank you. And if you have not responded and still thinking, definitely please share it in the chat box. The Women's Forest Congress is active on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Connect to our Women's Forest Congress network to share your positive experience from today. You can tag Women's Forest Congress and use the hashtag #WeAreWFC in all your posts. And be sure to join the Women's Forest Congress networking group on LinkedIn. Ladies, are you ready to hear about where we've come from and where we're going with the Congress? I hope that is a yes. I will now turn it over to two of the amazing steering committee members. We will begin with Ms. Ara Erickson, and following Ara, we will hear from Jasmine Brown. Ara, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Mia. Wonderful to see everybody virtually. And I can't believe we are nearing the countdown where we get to see each other in person at some point soon. So I'm going to share a little bit of what that's going to look like and a little bit of where we've come from over the past few years. And I hope everybody is doing well wherever you are calling in from. So Amy, if you could advance the slides. Thank you. So when I was putting together some slides on the airplane the other day, I realized that we've come a very long way in a very few years, but quite challenging for many people. And I just want to acknowledge the incredible work and community that we've built around the Women's Forest Congress since the fall of 2019. Just yesterday, someone mentioned in a different setting, oh, you guys have been working on the Women's Forest Congress for a year, maybe a year and a half. And two of us said, no, 2.5, almost 3 years now. And I know it feels a little bit like a time warp during COVID times. But in the fall of 2019, we had this idea that germinated and we formed a steering committee at the end of that year. And then in 2020, we really worked on watering that seed. We had a scoping summit in that summer where we heard from many people who are on this call right now, who really helped decide whether or not we should move forward. And we heard loud and clear that there was a purpose and a reason to move forward. Our working groups were formed that summer and fall, and we started to really dive into what the kind of how we would pull off a Women's Forest Congress and defining what the purpose was. In 2021, I think our seed took root. And we hosted a number of virtual events that were attended from anywhere from 95 or 75 to 400 plus women and others who joined the calls. We had an amazing advisory council form, and I just want to call out Asia Downton, who's on the phone right now or on the call right now, who really is helping shepherd that forward. So thank you. And to all of our advisory council members, thank you. We divided up onto themes. We identified some themes that we felt were important to work on, and we reorganized our working groups to match those themes. And we're going to hear a lot more about those later today. In 2022, just this year, I'm going to call it our leafing out phase. We had those content groups form that matched those themes. We've hosted 2 virtual events this year, and we are heading towards our in-person Congress in October. So that's a lot to cover on one slide. Really, I think what is not showing here, what I wish I could show on a slide, is just the heart and the soul of this effort and this movement. And there's no way to show that on a slide, but thank you everybody for being here and being part of that all the way from the seed germination to today. Next slide. So we are building support. Mia mentioned a few of the ways that everyone can connect, and I just wanted to call out a few amazing stats that have come in just in the last few days. We've had more than 1,000 people, maybe a couple people have attend at different times, attend at our virtual events. We have more than 1,000 LinkedIn followers, and that's growing exponentially. We have 24 blog posts out on the internet for people to read and hear about women who are participating in the Women's Forest Congress. And if you have not read any of these blog posts, I would recommend grabbing whatever that thing is that you use to recharge, or reading while you're sitting on a couch somewhere. There are amazing, heartfelt stories that are incredibly personal and incredibly moving. And every time I read one, I get some tears in my eyes. We have had 5 press releases. We have more than 100 people participating either in the steering committee, advisory council, or the content working groups. That is impressive. And we had 51 calls for proposals or responses to our calls for proposals for the actual in-person Congress. So really well done, everybody. Just a few snapshots or a few pieces of how we're moving forward. It takes resources to make something like this come together. We have a goal of raising 1.25 and a little bit of change in order to pull this off. And that includes resources that we needed when we started at that seed, at that germination stage, all the way to the leafing out and then hosting the event, plus some follow-up after the event in October. We are estimating that we're going to need about $1 million of that from sponsorships and then approximately $250,000 from registration. If we raise more than $1 million in sponsorships, then we'll be able to provide more financial resources and support for everybody to attend the in-person event to make certain that finances are not a barrier for participation. We have raised to date 88% of our goal towards that sponsorship amount. That is incredible. We have 25 confirmed. We have another 20 plus in the hopper right now who are pending. And if anybody who I personally am supposed to be reaching out to or following up with, know that I have you on my list. We have a small group of volunteers who are trying to raise this money, and we'll be coming back out this week and next week to see if we can round out to that $1 million. So thank you to all of you who've already sponsored. We'll get to that in a moment. And then under the registration, we'll be opening up registration later this month. After this event, you'll hear more when that is, and then we'll start tracking progress towards that registration goal. So incredible accomplishment so far, and I think a great example of really building support for something incredibly important. Thank you. Amy, next slide. So we mentioned the number of sponsors that we have received. I just saw this slide this morning. I think actually Amy Doty may have sent it in the middle of the night. And I had a little moment of a breath of, wow, look at all the names that are on here. I would love some more logos on here that might not have the color green in them because there's a lot of green here. These are companies and organizations who've either committed or are going to commit. We know that they're right on the cusp. So thank you for being sponsors and really helping make certain that this moves forward. And looking forward to adding many more logos in the future. Next slide, thank you. So we've mentioned a couple times already that October is coming. We are indeed having an in-person Women's Forest Congress. We will be in Minneapolis, right at a hotel directly connected to the airport. It is the most accessible place we could find in the country. There are more than 100 direct flights from airports across North America. It is an easy get on an airplane or drive, get off your airplane and walk across that little sky bridge to the hotel. There are plenty of other hotels in the region, in the area as well, if we do run out of space at that hotel. The reason we selected this place was because of its ability to get people there and also make it affordable. The steering committee and some of the advisory council members were just there. I cannot believe it, but just a month ago. And we were able to see the space. And I'll say that we all walked into there and immediately could start feeling what the energy was going to be like with a hotel full of amazing women. We only had a handful of us and it already felt spectacular. So put on your calendar, October 17th through 20th. I'll go over in a few moments some of the details of what we'll actually be doing there, but make certain you mark it on your calendar. There's a link on the website for where you can do a save the date, and then registration will open soon. And I was so glad to hear some of the call outs for how you both rejuvenate and what type of food you want. And we were able to actually meet the executive chef at the hotel, and he is excited to be featuring some local foods from the area. So thanks for all those great suggestions earlier. Next slide, Amy. So what are we actually going to be doing at the Congress? And we get this question a lot. And I'm just going to touch on it at a pretty high level, and then we're going to go into a little bit more detail later. So the first is that I mentioned we organized the Women's Forest Congress around these 5 key themes: leadership for equity and inclusion, supporting each other, women as catalysts for change, today's greatest forest challenges, and workforce opportunities. These are 5 themes that will be feeding into resolutions and outcomes from the Women's Forest Congress. We're going to do that in 2 ways. We're going to have general and plenary sessions where we hear inspirational speakers, where we hear about big themes and shifts that might be happening in our community and how we make those shifts happen. And then we'll have concurrent and dialogue sessions that are organized around those 5 themes. So those 51 proposals I mentioned are all tied to those themes, and there will be opportunities for Women's Forest Congress attendees and participants to engage in dialogue, learn from each other, understand what kind of change we want to see happen, and then move that towards action. This is truly going to be a roll up your sleeves moment to come in, learn, hear from each other, and move towards that action together. So next slide. So what will it actually look like? It will not look like little boxes on a screen, but in order to try to depict what a large event might look like on one slide, bear with me while I try to walk through these colors. First, I already mentioned we'll be having plenary general sessions with inspiration and sort of what you could picture the large auditorium type space. That's going to be that orange box. We'll have plenty of opportunities for making and fostering connections and networking and getting lots of nourishment and food and beverages. Those are the blue areas, as well as some quiet spaces and meeting spaces. We will have 5 what we're calling activation spaces that are going to be open throughout the entire session, all of the sessions, where we can all go and either spend some time to refresh and rejuvenate in the wellness lounge. We can go and connect with others, and how do we really build our network, and how do we act as catalysts for change and build out our community. We will have a large career exploration experience for people at all stages of their careers to be connected and learn about all the amazing opportunities and the number of different organizations and sectors that will be represented. There will be an innovation lab where you can bring your next great idea and get some feedback about what to do with it. And there will also be a place where you can take all of the energy you might have and pour it into something creative, calling that the Creativity Commons. Those areas will be sponsored by various organizations or companies, organizations or companies, but there'll be opportunities for many organizations to kind of co-sponsor and co-highlight their work there as well. And then those green ones are where our actual conversations, where our sessions and dialogues will take place. So in a lot happening in a small area, I guess I would say, take off any kind of expectations of what a normal conference might be, put those aside, and come ready to see something incredibly different and inspiring. Next slide, Amy. So we will arrive on Monday, October 17th. There will be likely some pre-Congress field trips and tours, not yet planned, but thinking about those. There will be an evening welcome reception and some words of inspiration to get us started. Our delegates, which Jasmine will cover next, will meet earlier that day, as well as there will be draft resolutions posted, likely publicly, that will be built from the already existing content groups. Starting early Tuesday morning, we'll hear once again some inspirational words in a plenary session, and then we will break out into those dialogues and smaller concurrent sessions. There will be an evening networking dinner on site, and during that time, our delegates will be refining the resolutions. They will be incorporating information and thoughts that they've heard in those sessions, and they will be working towards the following day. On Wednesday, we will wake up again. We will hear some other amazing inspiration and plenary sessions. We will continue with some of the thematic breakout sessions. And then the presentation of the final resolutions will be shared with the participants of the Women's Forest Congress, and those resolutions will be adopted. That evening, there will be some group dinners, and departures could start to begin that day if people wanted or you needed to head home on Wednesday. You're welcome to stay and continue your departure times on Thursday, and there's likely going to be some sort of post-Congress field trips, tours, and workshops and we'll organize some group dinners, but not one large networking dinner. If needed, for some reason, if those resolutions aren't fully adopted or we need additional changes, the post-Congress delegate deliberations will take place on Thursday. Throughout this whole time, there'll be those activation zones and plenty of networking time and plenty of times to connect with the amazing people in this community. I just have one last, oh, nope, I don't have one last thing to share. I'm going to hand it over to Jasmine now, who's going to touch on some more of where we've come from and where we're going.
Thank you so much, Ara. Next slide, please, Amy. So one way that we will turn content into action is through the delegates. We, at the retreat that we had earlier, we really sat down and tried to think about how delegates make this Congress very different than a conference. And one of the main ways is thinking about how delegates will serve to help facilitate the exchange of ideas and information. So the delegates will already be expected to attend each session and then basically help synthesize that information to put forth a resolution. Another responsibility of the delegate is to work in tandem with existing Women's Forest Congress leadership. So that includes us as a steering committee, the planning committee, content development, and advisory council, and existing Congress participants. Another responsibility is that they will synthesize thematic areas, so those 5 main themes, I have them on the next slide also, and make recommendations for next steps. So some of those next steps might include needing resources, maybe developing a research team, a new working group, or thinking of partnerships. A final responsibility of the delegates will include developing strategies and solutions to address the most pressing challenges for forests and women. We are planning on thinking about this as a pre, during, and post-Congress idea. We're not expecting everything to be resolved and wrapped up in a neat bow the minute that the Congress ends. So we're already talking about the plan for short and long-term solutions. How will this happen? We're planning on having pre-event materials that will catch all of the delegates up to speed. That also includes thinking about our institutional history, such as our journey, how did we get here, and also where we're planning on going. Delegates are planning on attending the Congress general and concurrent sessions and summarizing them in total. They will engage in discussions with delegates to develop workshop resolutions. And finally, they will propose final resolutions and outcomes. Next slide. As of right now, these are some of the stipulations we have for thinking about how we'll develop the group of delegates. One main goal is that they represent the Women's Forest Congress and also the forest community more broadly. We are planning on having up to 10 delegates per Congress theme, so this will hopefully get us to a group of 50. 50% of the delegate slots will be filled by those currently involved in either the Women's Forest Congress leadership or existing roles such as the advisory council or working groups. Again, this was to retain some of that institutional memory so that we're not completely starting from scratch, to explain the process and explain some of our principles. The end goal is to have 50 delegates in total. We're currently accepting nominations internally. Our open invitations will begin on June 22nd and go until July 15th. Next slide. That concludes my portion of this presentation. Thank you.